Hi, everybody. This is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto. And this is another in a series of videos where I look at projects that are part of the Cosmos ecosystem. This one is a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And we're going to be finding out all about that. If you decide that you want to preserve your privacy and make sure all the data that goes in and out of your computer is encrypted, then check out NordVPN. My affiliate link will give you something like a 2/3 discount on some of their packages. Now, before I introduce my guest, Stephen from Wynd Dao, WYND-DAO, and I'll have all the links in the description below. Please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT. If you're watching this on YouTube, you really should come over to bit.ly/CryptoRichOdyssey, where I post all my material, where I'm not censored, and I post additional material, the like of which YouTube does not appreciate. Hey, Stephen, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Thanks for having me, Crypto Rich.
You're so welcome. And you are one of the team at Wynd Dao.
That's right, yes.
What is it you do at Wynd?
Basically, everything not code related. With crypto projects, people have to wear a lot of hats. So marketing, business development, community, strategy, all those sorts of things.
Okay. All right. And Wynd is a project that launched on the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah, that's right.
I just want to do a little intro about Cosmos ecosystem. So if people aren't familiar with Cosmos, and the coin is Atom, and there's also Osmo and Juno and Evmos, I invite you to go find out about this ecosystem. Go check out their projects. I've done a whole series of videos on many of their projects, plus a video on how to get set up with the Osmosis DEX, which is a beautiful, sweet, easy to use, decentralized DeFi application. Really great DEX, really great DEX. And the Cosmos assets, including Osmo, including Wynd, including Secret, they have really low fees, really fast transaction times, independent blockchains that can all communicate with each other, so you don't get load, you don't get congestion, and some really new up-and-coming innovative projects that often launch through airdrops. So I got involved I bought Atom on a whim. I just thought, I'll buy some. I think it looks okay. And then I was staking it in my Exodus wallet. And then about a year later, I got free Osmo. And then I looked at Osmosis and I was like, oh my God, this is really good. This is a DEX better than PancakeSwap or Uniswap or any of those other ones. This is really good. And then I've been staking and claiming and pooling and mining and all that business. Ever since then, I've done very well. And I think, Stephen, you were saying the same thing. You got the Osmo airdrop as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the early days, like the first couple of days, it was like 8,000% APY. And then it went down to like 800% APY. Then it went to like 400, and it was just crazy.
Yes. No, that's good. I remember Chihuahua. I think it was 3,000 APY when they first launched. But by the way, just for Wynd, I don't know if it works with Wynd, but it does with many other applications. There's yieldmos.com, which is a free to use application which connects to your wallet, doesn't have your assets, they don't have your private keys, but they're able to auto compound way more often. So then you can get absolutely silly results, silly APIs.
It converts the APR into APY. It compounds daily. We're also very good friends with Yieldmos. We're partners with them, and I'm friends with them personally, so I know all about their product. OTC, non-custodial asset management, they're going to be huge.
Yes. Well, I've had them on for a couple of times.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, and I remember doing a video with them about how it worked, and I thought Rebus 20,000% staking rewards or something like that, and then it was, as I was doing the video, it was actually 75 or no, whatever the percentage was, tiny 1 point something times 10 to the power of 73%. What? What? There you go. So go check them out as well. Check out all my videos. All right. So Stephen, tell us about Wynd. What is Wynd?
That's actually a very big question to answer. So I'll go in a couple bite-sized chunks. So first and foremost, Wynd is a project on Juno network as an L1. So we're not our own DApp chain. We're not our own chain. We are within the Juno ecosystem, and we are a DAO. So let's start with that. We are a DAO. We have a token that you can stake and have governance rights for staking it. You can also earn staking rewards for Wynd. From that DAO, we plan to launch a series of DeFi products and protocols. The first one being a DEX, with a few more on the way. such as borrowing and lending, and staking derivatives, and more. Now, I guess this all sounds quite ambitious because it's not just like one product; it's like a series of products that's coming along. But I'm also honored to say that we've got a very talented engineering team. Wynd is co-founded by Ethan Fry, who also created Cosmosm, the smart contract platform that's widely used across the Cosmos ecosystem, such as Osmosis, Juno, Stargaze. I think over half of all of the Cosmos chains use Cosmosm. So we're very delighted to have him leading that side of the team. So I think the technical execution of things are really, really strong in this team. And our first product, I think I might have mentioned this, is a DEX. And we plan to be launching the DEX in early January, so less than 30 days away. It's going to be basically the native DEX of Juno. There's also Juno Swap, but we're working with Juno Swap to kind of migrate the liquidity, and we're also planning to, in the future, sunset Juno Swap, and we're going to be like the new de facto DEX center of the Juno ecosystem.
Right, okay, because I was going to ask about that, because within the Cosmos ecosystem, who's got DEXs? So Secret Network, there's a couple of DEXs for Secret Network. There's Osmosis DEX, which has the largest liquidity. There's Juno Swap, there's Evmos Swap. Who's it? There are other ones as well. I don't remember their names, but there's quite a few. But apart from Osmosis, they really have really, really low liquidity.
Yeah.
Which kind of defeats the point of a DEX, because there's going to be no exchanges. I can't exchange freely, easily from one asset to another. But when you say from moving, it's going to be the main DEX for Juno assets as well as Wynd assets, okay. But even then, Juno hasn't done that well. Juno Swap hasn't done that well compared to Osmosis DEX. Mm-hmm. Why another DEX? And how will this one be any better or more successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the key things that we're cognizant of is to not do exactly the same thing as Osmosis does. Because for the reasons that you mentioned, if we try to compete with Osmosis, I wouldn't even say try to compete, but if we went down the same path that Osmosis is doing, then we would almost surely lose, because everything they've already done, they have the economies of scale, they have the number of users, they have the liquidity. So if we create our DEX to be very similar to Osmosis in terms of feature set and product offering, we're not going to be differentiated, and we're not going to be able to provide incremental value into the ecosystem. I think within Juno, DEX is important because kind of the thesis of Juno Network as a whole is you kind of have a lot of different DAOs, different projects within the Juno ecosystem, and a lot of other assets to come from, like DAO assets. We call them Cosmosm or CW20 assets within Juno, and a couple examples would be like Neta, or like those assets. And to have a DEX native within Juno, where those long tail of assets from the Juno ecosystem can trade on, I think that makes a lot of sense. In terms of other points of differentiation, in the future, we will have cross-chain liquidity aggregation. So it's less about like how much liquidity you have, but like we can plug into other DEXs, other sources of liquidity, including Osmosis. So we're giving our users a wonderful DEX experience. So if they use our front end, they use our DEX, maybe not all of their trade is routed through our liquidity pools. We want to provide our users with the best price. So if that scenario, it could be like 30% of liquidity is routed through our liquidity, and then the rest is like 40% from Osmosis, and then the other 30 from someplace else. That can guarantee great trades and competitive trades from a user experience.
Right. Okay. Yes, because you would need to be distinct from Osmosis DEX to, for people to start using you. And then the liquidity aggregation. Oh my God. I can't keep up with blockchain. I can't keep up with blockchain. It's like first trying to understand Bitcoin. Okay, I now got Bitcoin. Now trying to understand Ethereum. You can build things, make the money programmable. Okay, now I got that. Now DeFi applications. Okay, I got that. Okay, now I got liquidity pools. What do you mean aggregate liquidity pools? What is that? How does that work?
Yeah. So let's say there's multiple sources of liquidity, and let's say they're obviously the more liquidity, the better, right? If we get into the math, it's called XYK pool for most trading assets. But basically, the more liquidity that you're trading with, the lower slippage you have, which is the price difference that your trade makes. you want to have very, very low slippage, and that is achieved by having a vast amount of liquidity. So let's say there's some liquidity in Osmosis, and there's a smaller amount in other places that are sort of fragmented. So if you're trading in Osmosis, you're getting an okay rate because you're not causing too much slippage. There's a lot of liquidity. If you're trading at some of these smaller exchanges and your order size isn't proportionally smaller to the liquidity pool, then you're going to have more slippage and you're going to lose more money on that trade because you're causing a pricing imbalance. What liquidity aggregation does is it basically scans all of the available pools that you can work with, and it takes all of the liquidity from like Osmosis and like 3 other dexes, and it pulls them into this one larger pool. And then when you do your trade, it measures the amount of slippage that you would cause on each of these different places, and it splits the order into smaller chunks. So it's going to send only a portion of that trade to be executed on Osmosis, and another smaller portion to some of these other dexes. And the big idea behind this is by splitting the trades up into smaller chunks and executing them in various different places, you're actually able to save a little bit of money on the slippage, and at the end, that's good for the trader.
Right, and over time, and for much larger players, that can be quite significant. And are there any extra costs or time? Does it take longer?
In theory, it can take a little bit longer, but I think that's a technical issue that I wouldn't really say it's a technical issue. I think for larger trades, it would absolutely come out ahead in most instances. And
Right.
then for smaller trades, it really wouldn't matter if you're trading like $50 or $100. The real benefits of liquidity aggregation only come into play when dealing with larger order sizes, where you actually would be causing slippage. And the other benefit on a DEX UI perspective is that it asymmetrically benefits DEXs or platforms with lower liquidity, because it allows those smaller players, those smaller dexes, to offer as competitive rates as some of the larger dexes through
Right.
liquidity aggregation.
And which would support decentralization. And
yes,
those that are watching, a DEX is a decentralized exchange. If you're not clear, compared to FTX or Binance, which are centralized exchanges, and you're handing your crypto over to some other third party. Okay, now you're saying that Wynd Dao is going to become, their DEX is going to become the DEX for the Juno ecosystem, and JunoSwap is going to be retired, and the liquidity is going to move over from JunoSwap over to the new DEX, which is launching sometime in January 2023. Is that right?
Yep.
But you're a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So do you want to say why Wynd Dao and not Wynd DEX? And then what is a DAO?
Okay, great. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, where the holders of the Wynd token, and those holders can stake it, they have a right to govern the DAO. They have the power to influence the future direction, development, and incentive allocation of the DAO and its products. So basically, it's like you have voting shares of a stock in a company. Why not just a DEX instead of a DAO? Well, I think by it being a DAO and not just a DEX, we have a much longer roadmap / runway of what we can do. We don't want to just be one product. Again, given the background of the team and the capability of their execution, we have a lot of things planned. And if we were just a DEX, that would severely limit the synergies and the scale of things that we have planned. Because we're building out a lot of these protocols in the future that will also be governed and owned by the DAO, we can create a lot of synergies between the products and the DEX and the other products, right? So if we look at Osmosis, Osmosis is a DEX. They're the #1 DEX. They're great, right? But a lot of the products that we'll be integrating with Osmosis is not fully owned by Osmosis. For example, borrowing and lending is going to be done by Mars Protocol, right? So Mars Protocol is going to have some value capture. Osmosis will have some value capture. But imagine if Osmosis built that lending protocol themselves, they would have all of the value capture and the synergistic values that it delivers. And then another one would be liquid staking. Like liquid staking is all the rage right now and for the past few weeks. And Stride is sort of the leader in that right now. But imagine, Stride is on Osmosis. There's some, synergistic values right there. But a lot of the liquid staking value is captured by Stride itself and not Osmosis. But imagine if the DEX also had a liquid staking product, they own all of the value there and all of the synergistic value. And then let's say, and there could be some interplay between liquid staking and the borrowing platform, right? So there's more opportunities to capture total value by having it all under the Wynd DAO.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for saying that, and thank you for referencing Stride, because I did an interview with Stride.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
So you saw that? Good. You should subscribe, comment, and like, and all that business. So you watch that. Okay. Now, what other applications are you going to be launching after the DEX? Anything you can tell us about?
Well, I mean, all this stuff is not like private. So we've talked about this previously. The DEX is the first one. In terms of future products into the next year, we probably can realistically expect borrow lending and staking derivatives of some sort in the next year. I can't reveal which one we'll do first, but both are kind of in development right now.
Right. Okay. And then what's the point of the token, the Wynd token?
Great question. There's actually a lot of use cases for Wynd. I mean, obviously you can stake it. And one kind of unique thing about Wynd is you can stake it for multiple or different durations. Where, like, for example, if you stake Juno, it's like a 28-day unbonding period and you get the APRs. Same with Osmosis, it's a shorter staking period, you get the rewards. With Wynd, you can select how long you want the unbonding period to be. And based on how long you select that unbonding period to be, your rewards go up the longer you select, the longer period, and also your voting power goes up as well. So the timeframes that you can select to bond your Wynd tokens would be 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 1 year, 2 years.
Wow.
So that means if you're in the 2-year option and you select it, and then you hit unbond, you're gonna have to wait 2 years before that token is liquid again.
Oh my God! And you're not getting staking rewards in that period either.
Okay, so if you hit unbond or unstake, you wouldn't. But we also have a feature because we recognize that, like, hey, these are crazy long durations. And if you're familiar with Osmosis, where you're in the 14-day pool and you hit the unbond button, you remove liquidity, you automatically go down to the 7-day rewards for the next 7 days, and then like after 7 days, you get the 1-day reward. It's a similar thing to that, where the user has a little bit more control. We call it rebonding. So if you are in, let's say, the 3-month option, right, and you want to increase the amount of time that you're bonded to, you can rebond up any time and as frequently as you like until you go up to the 2 year. So if I want to get more rewards and I'm in the 3-month one, I don't have to hit unbond, wait 3 months, and then do it again. I can just say, okay, from 3 months, I want to go to 6 months, get the proportional rewards there, and then from 6 months, I can go to a year and then to 2 years. Going down, you don't have that same level of flexibility because you need to wait the difference between the 2 periods. So if I'm in the 2-year option and I hit the rebond down to 1 year, then immediately I will begin earning the 1-year staking rewards. I will have the 1-year governance power. And then after that year's up, I can hit rebond again. I can go down to the 6-month one and then have to wait 6 months before I can do that again. And during that period of time, I'm earning the 6 months proportional rewards, 6 months proportional governance power.
Right. Okay. And I know Wynd is available now. You can stake it in Kepler. What is the staking rewards roughly?
I believe in the 2-year option, it's close to like 60. No, I think in the 1 year, it's like 60%, something like that. In the 2-year, I believe it is closer to 100%.
Right. Okay. Okay, that's pretty high. So I get those staking rewards. I can also use it. It gives me voting rights depending upon how many I have and how long I've bonded for. Is there anything else that I can do with the token? Any other uses?
Well, let me touch up about the voting rights, because that's an interesting thing, right? So people in crypto, they want decentralized decision making, and they don't want like all of the whales making all of the decisions, right? So like in other projects, and not to name any names, I think this is pretty ubiquitous across all the L1 dApp chains. Like some people feel like the validators are a cartel. It's like the top 5. People talk about the Nakamoto coefficient, right? It's like, yeah, realistically, if you get like, I don't know, 8 of the top 10, and there's like 150 validators in the set, if 8 of the top 10 are agree, or however many, then like basically they could push through whatever vote they can. And a lot of times people don't participate in the governance, or the validator just votes and like they just like vote on behalf of their users. Well, with Wynd Dao, it's actually a little bit different because we don't have validators. right? You don't have like a centralized, because we're not our own L1, every user has to vote for their vote to count. And if you don't vote, you don't have a validator that votes on your behalf, right? So that kind of makes it kind of more decentralized. The other thing is it's not just who has the most money, who has the most token that has the most say. It's also, there's a time commitment factor. Those who are most long-term oriented, those who have committed to the longest unbonding period have the most voting power. So for example, voting power scales linearly over time. So if like, let's say you have one Wynd token and you stake it into the 1 month option, then you can think of that as like one vote power, right? But if you stake that same one Wynd into the 24-month option, which is the 2-year, you have 24 votes. So and that's not changing how much money you have or Wynd you have. You have the same amount of Wynd, but because you're more committed by showing your bonding into your 2-year period, you have a 24 times louder of a voice, 24 times more of a say in how things go, just by the fact that you're a more long-term committed holder. And we trust that, you know, this is a sort of incentive alignment structure that will foster sustainable long-term growth.
Right, keep people involved. But a whale could still bond for 24 months, and then they've got
Sure.
24 times that, right? And then for the smaller token holders, they've lost liquidity, which they couldn't necessarily afford to lose.
Yeah.
But then,
But having said that, if the whale bonds for 24 months, then you can have more confidence that the whale is not going to do something stupid in the short term, because their tokens are going to be in there for 24 months at least, right? So it would be short-sighted and foolish of them to do something detrimental, maybe, you know, to the token prices. So in a long enough time horizon, you would expect that would be a benevolent whale in terms of creating ecosystem value and voting on things that make sense from a long-term perspective.
right. Okay, no, that makes sense. Okay, and the Wynd token, I take it, is available on JunoSwap.
It's actually not. The Wynd token will only be available once the DEX launches, Wynd DEX launches in the very early days of January.
Okay, because I got some from an airdrop.
You did. Yeah, so the tokens are available, but they're not tradable. So you can't go on JunoSwap and buy. So yeah, if you have the Wynd tokens, all the airdrop tokens are vesting. So everybody who received an airdrop, it vests over a year linearly. So you have every day a little bit more Wynd, but you can take the vesting tokens and you can stake all of it in any of the time durations that you want, whether it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever you choose. And you can begin earning rewards today if you have the Wynd tokens.
Right. Okay. Which I do. I thought check those out. See what I'm doing with them. Okay. All right. And then where is your funding from? Because even though the tokens are given away for free, Wynd is not a charity. You know, people need to get paid and they have bills and everything. So how are you funded?
Yeah, we're actually running very lean. We have a lot of community members and contributors who are just taking some Wynd tokens as grants, as payment. We also have some support from angel investors.
Right. Okay. All right. Let me see what else. And if people, I suppose I'm going to ask a silly question.
Sure.
And the answer you're going to give me is a very sensible answer, which is very common, which is what makes my question very silly. If people want to get involved, what should they do? You know, how are you about building your community? Do you see how my question's rather silly, Stephen?
That's a good question. I don't think it's silly at all. And I've seen this question asked in various places. I think it depends on the level of involvement that people want to get, right? If a person just wants to advocate for Wynd, they can do so on Twitter, on social media, on Reddit. They can retweet things. That's like a very simple way to get involved, promote Wynd. If the involvement is more like in depth, they want to be a contributor to the Wynd project beyond doing that. I actually think right now the bear market is a great time to get noticed because there aren't many people around compared to the bull market, and the people in the bear market they're really in it to be in it, and not just like chasing pumps and all this sort of crazy thing. So I would recommend just commenting frequently in Telegram, asking questions, thoughtful questions. Like for example, like we know who are kind of like really contributing in the community because we know who those people are in Telegram, and we notice these people, right? We also notice who's contributing a lot in the Commonwealth discussion. So I would recommend contributing as much as possible in any way that the user can, whether it's making ideas or suggestions on Commonwealths, like, hey, would this be a cool idea to use the DAO funds? or like, hey, this is a cool thing for the environmental DAO, or this is like a good DAO treasury management strategy, right? Those are great ways to create discussion and also get noticed.
Okay, very good, very good. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to let us know, or anything else you want to cover that we haven't covered already? It's important.
One thing I think is really unique is the gauge system that we have. So DEXs and many DEXs, they have token incentives, right? So like, for example, if you stake your LP tokens and you bond them. Oh, by the way, we have multiple bonding durations for our LP tokens as well. And as you may have figured out from the duration of our staking options, they're a little bit longer than some other DEXs. So you can bond your liquidity LP position for 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, and then the rewards kind of scale upwards as well. And then the same mechanism of rebonding works. So let's say you're in the 6-week option and you want to like kind of reduce it down, and maybe you want to like eventually liquidate in like 2 months or whatever. You can actually rebond it down from 6 weeks down to 4 weeks, where you'll instantly start earning the rewards for 4 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, you can hit rebond again. So that way you're not like stuck. It's like, oh, I'm in 6 weeks and I don't have any rewards for if I get out of it. So people can actually manage their liquidity in an LP pool a little bit, whereas traditional is like once you're in the LP, like you're in the LP, right? It's like you either take it out or you're not. But in this situation, you can kind of shift it up or down and adds another dynamic. But what I wanted to get to is the gauge system. So it's like, how are the liquidity rewards? How are the Wynd tokens distributed to each of the liquidity pools? Because that determines your APRs, right? Like, why does this one pool, let's say Wynd Juno pool, why is that 80% APR? And why is this other Atom Juno pool like 60% APR, right? So it's managed through a gauge system. And how we do it, and this isn't a completely new idea. This is derived from inspirations from Curve, which is an Ethereum-based project, where so we go back to the governance power, right? Like everybody has governance power if they stake their Wynd, right? So then what we do is we're saying, okay, all these liquidity pools, let's say like liquidity pools like 1 through 10, they have these gauges, and how it would work is people with voting power can put their voting power into these gauges, and you can think of these gauges as sort of like weights. So the more weight a gauge gets for a certain pool, the more rewards it gets. So that way we're turning the governance of Wynd Dao as an entity that controls the incentive allocation of Wynd incentives into liquidity pools. So let's say, for example, there's like 1 million voting power, right? And let's say 50% of that goes into the Juno Wynd pool. So all of the monthly emissions, half of the monthly emissions for incentives will go into that one pool, and then the rest will be distributed however the rest of the participants vote. So that encourages every single participant to put their gauge weight in one of the pools that they like, and this opens up a really interesting new meta, right? So like, let's say, before I go any further, let me ask you if you have any questions about what I described, or if there are any points
I'm fascinated. So essentially, so people can vote. There's the voting. If they've staked their Wynd, they get voting. They get to vote on which pools get increased rewards.
Yes. And those who stake the longest have the most voice. So then that's another area of long-term incentive alignment, right?
Okay.
And what we hope to not see is that because these long-term stakers of Wynd hold the most power, we're unlikely to see some new shitcoin token launches and it's like 9,000% APR because somebody dumped a bunch in there. We're less likely to see that because I think the long-term Wynd incentives, long-term stakers would realize that that's not actually value accretive, and it's more important to shift the weights over there. So like the thing is, like, yes, a new token could try to launch with some APR, but it's up to them to convince the stakers to allocate gauge weight. And if it doesn't smell right, it doesn't look right, they're not going to get the right amount of incentives to print that high APR within the liquidity pool. So they can just go somewhere else, right? And the other new interesting meta is that if you think of it from an individual perspective, it's like, okay, like, you like this pool, you can, put your gauge weight, and you can actually make a measurable impact. Even one change in one vote can make a very small but measurable impact. Unlike some others where it's like, okay, if the gov prop passes, these are all the things, this is how it's going to be. And it's very rigid, right? Like 30% here, 20% there. If no, then it's like, oh, we have to figure something else. This is a much more dynamic way where every single individual user can make a measurable impact. Like, hey, I put the gauge, like, 20 votes worth of gauge in this one pool, and it went up by like 0.0003, right? So that's really cool from an individual.
Where would the extra rewards come from, though, to make up for those additional voted rewards?
So the rewards would come from the DAO. We would have a fixed amount that would be going into the liquidity pools. So we haven't released a number yet, so I'm just going to say a number. This could be or could not be the final number. But let's say every month we allocate, let's say, 1 million Wynd tokens to be distributed into the liquidity pools, and then based on the gauge weight is how that 1 million. So it's part of the token economics. There's going to be some inflation, and some of that inflation is going to be used to incentivize these liquidity pools.
Okay, so let me get this. So I've staked some Wynd, and the Wynd Juno pool is paying X amount, and then the Wynd Atom pool is paying less. But let's say the people that have the vote, they vote for the Wynd Atom pool to get more, and then the more would come from the amount that you've set aside every month, that some of that would go into the Wynd Atom pool in preference to the other pools, according to the votes.
Yeah, so the amount distributed for incentives is fixed. So the gauge is just determined the percentage allocation. So it's like just how much of that slice gets allocated to each of the liquidity pools.
Okay, very interesting.
And I've been trying to get to this point. The new meta I'm talking about is like from an individual perspective, I think it's quite interesting. But from a community perspective, from a cross-chain DAO perspective, I think it gets even more interesting because think about all the communities that we airdropped Wynd to, right? Juno community, Osmosis community, Regen, and we might have some more airdrops. We will have more, a second round, like a large airdrop coming up as well. But from a community perspective, let's say you're another crypto project, right? And let's like XYZ project, and some of your community members have Wynd staked, right? And then you'll reach out to these community members and be like, hey, there's this Wynd gauge, and we want XYZ, our token, to be listed on Wynd, and we also want incentives to be dropped into our liquidity pool. So a couple options: they can rally all of their community members who currently stake Wynd and be like, hey, shift your gauge weight into our pool. That way you can ensure that when our XYZ token gets traded, there's going to be some liquidity incentives, and we can track liquidity, and that's good for our project. So now you have like an instance where the incentives are aligned for other projects, other protocols, to rally their community members to do something on a different DeFi protocol for their benefit. Or XYZ protocol, they can slowly acquire Wynd into their treasury and have massive vote weight, and then drop that vote weight into their liquidity pool, ensuring that their liquidity pool has good amount of incentives diverted to it. So that's one like protocol. Now imagine like 10 different protocols trying to do the same thing. What that does to the token economics of Wynd. Everybody's trying to get some Wynd or rally their community members to like, hey, put your Wynd staking gauge into our liquidity pool. No, put it in our liquidity pool. So then there's like this competition going on, and it creates this demand, right?
And then people will want to. They may bond and stake for longer in order to get higher rewards and a greater voting power, which reduces the supply, the liquid supply.
Right.
And then there's this greater demand from these communities, as you described, which would increase the demand for a diminishing supply of Wynd.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Very good. Anything else about the gauge?
I can tease a little bit more alpha, right? So it's like because we're talking a lot about the DEX gauges, right? But the gauge is not a concept that's unique to just the DEX. And in future products, you can bet that the Wynd token can play a similar role. So if you can imagine like all this demand that could be generated from gauges just from the DEX product alone, once the next product launches and the product after that, it will have similar mechanisms that from the similar principles. And it could further drive the demand of Wynd through similar gauge mechanisms as well.
Right. Okay. Very good. Now something's occurred to me about Juno Swap and Juno. which is if Windex is going to become the main DEX for the Juno ecosystem, then what's going to happen to Juno as a token?
I think it's hard to say what Juno as a token as a whole would do just based on one project within Juno. I think if Wynd is very successful and it becomes like a flagship product within the Juno and it becomes a sort of like killer app, then obviously I think good things would happen to Juno from an ecosystem perspective. It may attract other projects to start building on Juno. It could, bring up the Juno community. It can, drive more buzz around it. I hate price speculation, so I can't really say on that. But I think obviously if the individual projects within Juno, such as Wynd, do well, then obviously that's good for Juno.
No, but I was asking because Juno's the governance token for Junoswap, and if Junoswap is
okay, I got you. So Juno token is actually not the governance token for Junoswap. Junoswap, and I wouldn't say this is a misnomer, but I can see how it can be confusing. Junoswap and the Juno team is completely separate. Different dev teams, different project. It's just a project within Juno that's called Junoswap. And it's actually the governance token for Junoswap is called RAW, R-A-W. And the governance for that is rawdao.zone. So in a couple days, probably when this video comes out, you'll probably see something on chain that kind of answers your question. So I don't want to say anything right now, but there's some stuff in the works, and by the time this is out, I would imagine that you'll see it on chain.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. It's Raw, and I got Raw in an airdrop as well, and I got Netta in an airdrop, and I got Juno in an airdrop, and an ecosystem that's definitely worth looking into, including Wynd. What you said is completely fascinating, and there's going to be a further airdrop of Wynd. Okay. Anything else you want to let us know?
I would say that's pretty much it. I would recommend everybody to stay tuned for what we have coming around the corner. We definitely have a lot, but I really appreciate you asking all these thoughtful questions, even some of the funnier ones. It's been a great time chatting.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on, especially near the Windex when that launches or whatever. And
yeah, certainly.
Please do reach out directly or via our mutual contact, my cousin Crypto Assassin. And I'll have all the links in the description below, and people can go check out Wynd Dao and follow them on Twitter and join their Telegram announcements channel, all that stuff, right? And if you have any comments or questions, put them in the description below. If you do have comments and questions, put them under the Odyssey video. And if you are going to share, please do share this video, share the Odyssey video. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with Wynd profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Stephen signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.